My name is Bob Girrier, and I'm president of Pacific Forum, a Honolulu-based nonprofit research institute. We are joined by colleagues from U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. Today, we've gathered senior women defense leaders from each of the Quad countries, Australia, Japan, India, and the United States, countries with like-minded visions in advancing a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. We're taking the opportunity today to celebrate and reflect on the 20th anniversary of the unanimous adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, passed on October 31st, 2000. UN Security Council Resolution 1325 marked the first time the Security Council addressed the disproportionate and unique impact of armed conflict on women and recognized the undervalued and underutilized contributions women make to conflict prevention, peacekeeping, conflict resolution, and peace building. Over the years, significant efforts and progress have been made in this regard. To date, the United States and over 10 countries in the Indo-Pacific have adopted national plans and policies for the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. While these are significant achievements, still more needs to be done to make peace more durable and inclusive, and ultimately transform international peace and security. This webinar is an opportunity to highlight how the defense sector plays a role in women, peace, and security, and how WPS implementation contributes to a free and open Indo-Pacific. We hope to mark the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on WPS and review how its agenda has evolved through defense and security sector implementation. Perhaps most importantly, we hope to underscore how our shared values foster secure, resilient, and inclusive societies. Therefore, we are highlighting the Quad countries' efforts and commitment to women, peace, and security in the Indo-Pacific. We now have a video introduction by U.S. Indo-PACOM Commander Admiral Philip Davidson.
It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the inaugural Women, Peace, and Security Quad panel. We are excited to bring our global audience together to observe this exceptional panel of female officers as they share their perspectives on women, peace, and security in the region and celebrate the 20th anniversary of this vital movement. 20 years ago this month, the UN Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 1325 to address the disproportionate impact armed conflict and crisis has on women. This landmark resolution recognized the critical roles women play in conflict prevention and resolution, as well as humanitarian response and in peacekeeping and post-conflict recovery. Considered the foundation of the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda, Resolution 1325 calls upon member states to promote the full and equal participation of women in all things related to peace and security. And for the last 20 years, the defense sector has recognized women, peace, and security as an inclusive security approach that factors in the different needs and perspectives that achieve lasting security outcomes. Over the next 90 minutes, you will hear from senior female officers from the United States, Australia, India, and Japan, who work tirelessly to advance security and stability throughout the region. This group of dedicated leaders serving in each of the armed forces of the Quad, 4 democracies dedicated to the idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific, 4 nations committed to inclusion and investment to improve security outcomes. Their unique perspectives underscore how a secure and prosperous region enables opportunities for leadership, innovation, and peace. And we are proud to have a robust and expanding Women, Peace, and Security program at U.S. Indo-PACOM to support the Department of Defense's strategic framework and ensure a diverse and inclusive joint and coalition fighting force. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today. I hope you enjoy this panel and the informative discussions that will continue to advance the ideals of women, peace, and security in the Indo-Pacific. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our panelists joining us today. From India, Rear Admiral Arti Sarin, Command Medical Officer, Southern Naval Command. From Australia, Commander Philippa, Royal Australian Navy, who has served as Commander Task Group 637, Australia's regional engagement mission in the Southwest Pacific and is deployed as Commander Task Group 635.3. From Japan, Captain Junko Kawashima, Chief of Operational Logistics Section, Logistics Planning and Supplies Division, MSO, Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. And from the U.S., Major General Suzanne P. Vares-Lum, U.S. Army, Mobilization Assistant to the Commander, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. Each panelist will provide more on their professional background and address our opening question. What does the anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on WPS mean to me? It'll take 5 minutes for each of these, then we'll follow up with 3 more questions. We'll begin with Rear Admiral Sarin. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning to all of you, and I'm Sergeant Rear Admiral Arti Sarin, representing India at this very distinguished webinar. I am a doctor. I am a radiologist as well as a radiation oncologist. I have served the Indian Navy for the last 35 years, and I'm now serving as the Command Medical Officer at the Southern Naval Command, and have taken on various appointments, which I shall talk about in question 2 and question 3. About what the anniversary of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security means to me. Yes, it is a landmark resolution, the UNSCR, as already mentioned by the Admiral. 1325 and the 8 other resolutions that followed that address of the women, peace, and security was the first of many international recognitions that women have an important role to play in matters of peacekeeping, security, and conflict-related sexual violence. It's been 2 decades of this effort, and efforts to implement this are continuously happening all over the world. And I'm proud to say that inclusion of women groups at different levels to work towards the peace process is slowly and steadily increasing. India has slowly inched towards the target of about 15% women peacekeepers placed in the UN. Gender perspectives are being talked about and slowly getting incorporated into planning and execution. The Secretary General is personally endorsing the concept and has stressed it in his Action for Peacekeeping initiative. There is now a focus on sexual violence against women and girls in conflict area and how we measure up to deal with this. This anniversary year, of course, thrown up challenges in the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still evolving, and the women, peace, and security agenda will need further support and sustenance in this kind of a background. I would also like to mention that the push for the inclusion of women in the security sector to strengthen their role be sustained and if not increased. Women bring a wider perspective to humanitarian, social, and economic issues, and hence their political participation should increase, and so should their socio-economic opportunities. There should be a higher participation of women in senior decision-making and leadership roles as part of negotiating delegations in peacekeeping, whether it is in conflict prevention, resolution, crisis management, post-conflict reconstruction, and all such measures. Women uniformed personnel are critical in intelligence gathering, planning, civil military affairs, and community outreach activities conducted by various UN peacekeeping missions all over the world. I'm proud to say that India is among the top 5 contributors to the current UN peacekeeping missions. As far as troops are concerned, India has led the way in increasing women's participation towards gender mainstreaming. The Indian Army has been able to accomplish its pledge of deploying around 15% women officers in the UN peacekeeping contingents as staff officers, military observers, doctors, nurses, and female engagement officers. You will be glad to know that the Gender Advocate of the Year award bestowed upon Major Suman Gavani from India on Peacekeeper Day this year in 2020 is testimony to India's commitment in preparing and deploying professional peacekeepers. The focus on training is very clear by the Indian UN training facility, that is the Center for United Nations Peacekeeping, which has incorporated the aspects of the role of women in peacekeeping related gender mainstreaming in its curriculum. In a very special female military officers course validated by the United Nations. The effects of this are visible on ground, where there is a marked effect of reduction in violence against women and girls, where women peacekeepers have been deployed. Training further in conflict-related sexual violence courses were also very beneficial to Major Suman, where she was able to interact with other women peacekeepers from all walks, police women, other officers from other countries, as well as survivors. Hence, I would like to just conclude by saying that training and leadership, as stressed by all people I have spoken to, by senior female colleagues, they all mentioned that they want leadership by senior female colleagues in the planning process will go a long way in building impetus and sustaining the momentum in the implementation of the UNSCR 1325 towards women, peace, and security agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Commander Hay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's forum. My name is Commander Philippa Hay. I'm an officer of 28 years service in the Royal Australian Navy, having joined at 17, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. As we mark this 20th anniversary of the Security Revolution, I think we must continue to transform the rhetoric into action, and certainly the leaders at the panel today are part of that. The Security Revolution calls for a focus on the prevention of and the protection of violence against women in conflict and in fragile contexts, and women's meaningful participation and leadership in the peace processes and participation in relief and recovery efforts is making a difference in our region around the world, and I encourage all to continue to do so. Australia has taken a leadership role in the WPS agenda, and we're one of the first states in the Indo-Pacific region to develop a national action plan on women, peace and security, which covers right out to this year. And that national action plan has guided our protection of women's rights and girls' human rights and the promotion of their meaningful leadership in the conflict prevention and resolution, and progress toward better outcomes in fragile or conflict or post-conflict settings. When I think about what it means to me, I look back across my 28 years of service in the Navy and how the inclusion of women has changed the security outcomes. Across all operations, where once I saw no women, I now see women everywhere participating in all roles, both in the softer roles, as someone would like to refer to, which I'm sure Admiral Sarin would agree, in the health space and the logistics space, or the combat roles. And that has brought with it a new lens of which we can operate and new considerations. In a maritime security perspective, I see women part of all parts of the security efforts. And I think back to my times as a boarding officer doing maritime security and how the inclusion of women has brought a calming effect upon the units that we were boarding, as opposed to a slightly more robust foresight stance that male counterparts would take. As I've moved through the ranks, I've seen women being magnificent diplomats. And I think this is our key point that we can bring to the setting. As military leaders, we are constantly ambassadors for our nations. We represent the best of our nation can be. We're strong relationship builders. We have high emotional intelligence, and we're not stymied by ego. And I think that the Security Council resolution, with its aim to prevent violence and conflict against women, only other women can resolve that. And through our strong leadership, we'll be able to do that. I'm a big believer that you cannot be what you cannot see. And so for the women leaders who are dialed in today, I encourage you to take stock of what's being spoken of today and use your positions, no matter what rank you are, to be able to continue to spread and transform the way we conduct our security and military business throughout the region, and work together as a quad partnership so we can have a prevention of violence, and we can project women and children and girls in times of conflict or security crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commander Hay. Captain Kawashima, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to join this WPS Quad webinar to celebrate the 20th anniversary of UNSCR 1325. WPS is underpinned by the US, Australia, India, and Japan's common values of human rights, democracy, freedom, and equality. This is a very important concept for the cooperation among the countries of Indo-Pacific and the people in these countries. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. It's a bit too personal, I think, but I think this would be my answer to what is the 1325 means to me. I am a Navy captain. I am a ship officer and worked on ships for about 11 years. Speaking about gender, one post which enlightened me was the captain of a frigate. I thought and thought every day about how to make my ship strong and how to lead my officers and crews to see the same direction as a one ship. Having a lot of discussion with them, more than 95% of whom were males, I recognized that I didn't have to behave like a male captain and should not focus too much on being seen as a woman. As a commander, it's the most important to make his or her utmost effort to complete the mission and concentrate on the goal. Another career relating to WPS was the assignment to NATO. I worked for the Special Representative for the Secretary General of NATO for WPS. European countries have a variety of cultural and historical backgrounds, ethnic groups, and therefore the security environment is really complicated. And as NATO is a political and military organization, WPS environment in NATO is very unique. We were required to find practical and concrete military-like solutions while we were also sent political messages. My most valuable experience in the NATO WPS office was launching a research project on gender and maritime security. As you know, the migration problem is getting more serious along the Mediterranean Sea, and it became an issue of violation of human rights. Gender perspective is necessary not only on land, but also in the maritime domain. Secondly, I'd like to mention my country. Japan intends to enhance cooperation with international countries and to assist in women's empowerment and gender equality under the Resolution 2025. As for the JDF, this result is not caused only by 1325, but the restriction for females in almost all the assignments was abolished, and the numbers of female high-rankers are increasing. But of course, this is not all about numbers. Now, I'd like to talk about the importance of women's participation. Fortunately, Japan doesn't have severe conflict, but lots of natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, floods hit our country. The situation after disasters is terribly disordered, and sometimes women and children suffer from the violation of human rights. As the global climate changes worsen, the scale and the equality of natural disasters, disaster relief operations of JSDF are increasing. Statistics show that about 70% of disasters occur in the Asia-Pacific area. There are cases when the military is dispatched to the disaster-stricken area, and I suppose that we need gender perspectives to protect and cooperate with the people. From that point of view, the women's participation works effectively and directly. HUDR will be one of the fields in which women should participate in defense institutions, and they will contribute to achieve regional stability. On the 6th October, the second Japan, Australia, India, and the US foreign ministers meeting took place, and they concurred on practical cooperation in various areas. The cooperation between these four countries is essential for stability and prosperity in Indo-Pacific region, and I believe that cooperation in the WPS field will contribute to it. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Captain Kawashima. And our final respondent to this first opening question, and again, to restate the question, what does the anniversary of 1325 on WPS mean to me? To wrap up this first round is Major General Suzanne Vares-Lum from U.S. Indo-Pacific.
Thank you, Admiral. I appreciate it. And, you know, going last means that, and in this maritime space, since I'm the only Army land component officer here, means that you've all hit upon the key points that I was going to mention, which I'm so glad, because that tells you one thing: like-minded allies and partners in this quad have the same direction, the same heading or course, as you would say, all you naval officers. But, you know, it is really an honor and privilege to be with this group of distinguished military officers who happen to be women. And I say that because we're in such a place, as all of you had said, that had we not been in a free and open society, a democracy that promotes equality, human rights, and the rule of law, I don't know that we would have the opportunities that we do today to have this amazing forum that says much about a free and open society. So just for those out there, I am the mobilization assistant to Admiral Davidson, who spoke earlier. Those of you who are not aware, Indo-Pacific Command spans from all US forces from the California coast to the west coast of India. And as some have said, from Hollywood to Bollywood, polar bears to penguins. We deal and engage with 36 nations, 14 time zones, and a host of our own national defense strategy challenges of China, Russia, violent extremism, and as well as North Korea. And as was mentioned by Captain Kawashima, more natural disasters occur in this region than any other place in the world. Vast expanse, and that's why we have so many admirals, commanders, and captains on the line here. We call it the blue continent here. But with that, it's more populated, really. And they say that the population is increasing. You know, the largest country, China, the largest democracy, India, and, you know, the rising middle class that we have in this region includes 50-50 men and women in this population. And for us to engage in this region, women need to be part of the problem solving and solutions. I can proudly say in the United States that we have a national action plan that has now been implemented into the president signed the Women, Peace and Security Act that allowed Congress to apply funding against women, peace and security agenda, and the defense implementation guidance that we are following that has led to our Indo-Pacific Command instruction that requires, we have now an official gender advisor, Ms. Sharon Feist, who's on the line, as well as funding for gender advisors. And we've run our gender advisor course with the help, of course, of Australia and New Zealand, and looking at those models that Australia has provided for us, and joint exercises where we can exercise some of these women, peace and security issues that were mentioned by all of our panelists so far. But I do want to say one thing about what it means to me is, you know, having been deployed during Operation Iraqi Freedom 3, when we didn't think about the planning of how do we engage in a society that doesn't allow men to have access to the female population, which is 50%, that deals with, you know, if we don't think about that and having female engagement teams, or now that the UN has addressed the issue of having women as part of peacekeeping operations to stabilize the area, we will be late to need. And I'm seeing that we're thinking about these ahead of time. And we know, and we've seen the statistics, that where women are included in participation of peacekeeping, as well as problem solving, peacemaking, where women have access to education and opportunities and governance, that those countries are more stable. And I believe that we can help the region, you know, share these ideas, that when we advance the agenda of women, peace and security over the next 20 years, that we can improve and have a more peaceful and stable region. Thank you.
Thank you, General Vares-Lum. I appreciate all the comments from the panelists in this first round. We've temporarily lost the connection with India, but we'll just continue, and as soon as we regain that connection, we'll bring Admiral Sarin back in. So let's move on to our second question. And this question just quite simply is, what motivated you to join your nation's defense force or military? And what are some of the unique contributions you have made during your time in service? We'll pick up with Commander Hay. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. I was very fortunate. I spent my childhood growing up on the water, spending holidays on my father's yacht. I come from a family of 3 daughters. We were mum's girls and dad's sons. I went to a girls' school, and my parents in my school taught me to be tough, resilient, high level of skill and integrity, and be brave, but also to be a lady, to be compassionate, considerate, and stand up for myself and for others. I was adventurous, sporty, loved to lead, so Navy was a perfect fit. But boy, didn't I get a surprise when I joined at 17 and entered a fully male-dominated world where at the time less than 7% of women were in the Navy. Women had only been at sea for a few years. Women had only recently been recognised as full-serving officers, not the Women's Royal Auxiliary Navy. Women weren't allowed to serve once they had been married, and certainly weren't allowed to serve once they had children. And that had all changed just shortly after I joined. The men saw the women as invaders on their ships and women having to conform with their waves. But I was there to serve, and I was there to be an officer. And that's exactly what I did. I studied hard. I did the best I could be, not to be the best, but to be the best me. And I took every opportunity that was afforded to me. Plus, I had some really great male peers who supported me and recognised me as an officer first. And that was key to my success in my career. To me, I became the first female to become a ship's diver in the Royal Australian Navy, but that might not have been done had I not had the support of my male peers. I've served 3 times at sea in command leadership roles, being the only female on board, which has had its own challenges. I've most recently become the first female commander to command a task force over at RIMPAC. And for me, it's all just about being the best naval officer they can possibly be. So I think back, and your question, Sarah, is what's been my unique contribution to be able to achieve that? I'm first and foremost a naval officer, but that was when I joined at 17. These days, I'm a wife and I'm a mother of 3 children. The Australian Navy is now 17%, and the Royal Australian Defence Force, the Australian Defence Force as a whole is nearing 20% overall. My unique contribution to Navy is to continue to show that I am a worthy contributing officer in the Defence Force, and that having a marriage and my family can remain intact and I can execute my career at my pace. We need women in our military across all 4 of our nations in the Quad here today. When we are included, as we've discussed, we can help better the region. We can walk the talk. Again, it's important that it's not just a rhetoric. We walk the talk and we show the region the strength that women bring to the service. But more importantly, we can assist other nations who, not just in their military, their broader community, still put women in a lesser position. And unless we can demonstrate that ourselves, we're merely coming out with some good catchphrases rather than actually demonstrating our own commitment to our own people and our own officers. In the ADF, we continue to work to increase women numbers in the ADF, and more broadly seek to be more inclusive and have more diversity to better reflect the Australian nation, because the region in which we operate is full of peoples from all around the region, and not just from the original colonies of Australia. And it's important that we have those voices in there so that we better engage with the region. That's been my journey, the journey that I continue to live and enjoy. For me, it's about being the best me, the best officer I could possibly be, and walking the walk, not just walking the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Hay. I see that Admiral Sarin, the connection's been restored. That's wonderful. We can bring you in now if you'd like, Admiral. This is the second question, and I'll restate it. What motivated you to join your nation's defense force? or military? And what are some of the unique contributions you have made during your time in service?
I hail from a family of naval officers. I grew up in the Indian naval environment, which I loved. I always aspired to be a doctor and was once very impressed by a woman naval doctor who I went to for treatment, by her competence as well as her personality. That was surely an inspiration for me. And amongst other things, I chose to join the Armed Forces Medical College with a permanent commission at the very outset, which means I always meant myself to join the Armed Forces in the service of the nation. Some unique contributions that I think I may have made during my time in service in this long career of 34 years, which saw me through an evolution from a general duty doctor, where I had the unique opportunity of being one of the first few women to be deployed in the care of troops, as well as civilians in insurgency hit territory. I've served in the Andaman Islands, remote areas, the problems of, evacuating patients in poor weather conditions, been through all of that. I got a chance to look after earthquake victims in the Bhuj in 2000. I had a long stint as a professional radiologist and radiation oncologist. In 2015, I headed a 110-bedded oncology center at Pune and completed the task of shifting the center to a new location. I also went on to work as the medical superintendent as a hospital administrator of an 840-bedded hospital. My next posting exposed me to industrial health. I achieved 100% compliance of their annual medical employees, of 10,000 employees. In my present appointment, I have the charge of 4 hospitals and 11 other units and supervise the healthcare of thousands of naval personnel, their dependents, defense civilians, and veterans. So maybe my contribution to the armed forces has been as a doctor, as an academician, a health administrator, a trainer of residents, interns, paramedics. So my contribution probably in this whole thing has been achieving a senior leadership position and training people, which I believe is the key to everything that we must do. And I echo the previous speaker who said, walk the walk and walk the talk. It's very important to think out of the box, not within your own milieu, your own cocoon. Think worldwide, think broad, and think out of the box. And that's how I conclude.
Super. Thank you, Admiral. These are just terrific stories, listening to you all speak. We'll move on to Captain Kawashima, please.
Okay, first question, why I joined Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. First reason, I wanted to work in a job in international environment and a challenging job, and wanted to grow up through the job. My father was an engineer, and he often visited foreign countries. I remember him repeatedly saying to me that the day will soon come when women work the same as men, and when women are evaluated as they are. So you can try everything you want. His words always gave me courage and made me positive. And when my brother became a doctor, I thought working to save people was high-minded. And this was the second reason to join SDF. At the time, there were a small number of women in MSDF, but I finally decided to join MSDF. The second question about the contribution. There were a few women senior ship officers when I joined SDF in 1997, and I never dreamed that women would be a captain of a warship. I graduated a private university, not military academy. Honestly, this didn't work advantageously in SDF, but I was given opportunities to serve as a captain and to work as a staff in NATO. I suppose my career proved that anyone who is sincere in his or her duty can get opportunities for worthwhile and interesting jobs. Furthermore, I have and cruise a lot. I think it has some effect to raise awareness that we are in the same team. We are not so different. Women can contribute to make something better. and we can cooperate for our security. This is not so unique, but I believe this is my contribution to MSDF.
Thank you, Captain. And we'll move on to General Vares-Lum. I'll repeat the question just for our viewers, just so everyone stays connected with our themes. What motivated you to join your nation's defense force or military, and what are some of the unique contributions you have made during your time in service? General?
Thank you, Admiral. And just as all of our panelists had said, I hear a theme on family inspired by service and doing something greater than yourself. And that's a lot of similar things for me as well. Although my dad wasn't in the Navy, he was in the Army, so I'm in the Army. So I see how that has impacted some of you. But my father is a Vietnam veteran, served 40 years total. All of my uncles and my great uncles served during World War II, and my sister actually retired from the Air Force. So it's a family of service, and it was certainly something that influenced me when I saw a lot of the dedication, the camaraderie, doing something bigger than yourself. Because freedom isn't free. Maintaining peace and stability means that there has to be a group of people who are dedicated to that, and I wanted to be a part of that. And sure enough, I joined in 1986 as a private, when there were only women together at basic training. Now it's integrated, but back then that wasn't the case. I went through ROTC and became a second lieutenant in the Military Intelligence Corps at a time when, our University of Hawaii ROTC program is over 100-year program. And actually I'm the first female general officer to graduate from that program of the, couple, of all the GOs from that 100-year program. In terms of what I've done to contribute, I think, to change is taking on these roles, when that didn't exist before. So when I joined, there were no females at brigade level and below. So my first duty assignment was division artillery. I was a fire support intelligence officer, even as an intel officer, which was a shocker for me. Very combat arms, very male oriented, and, going in there a little nervous. But what was amazing is that all of these male leaders taught me how to be a leader and not be afraid. And I think I took that. And also by working hard and doing my best, bringing all of my capability without fear to the position, I think myself, along with many other women who broke new ground, it sent a message that, well, maybe the admiral, the captain, the commander, maybe it can be done. So I think all of us, including myself, have sort of set a bar that, well, there are some competent people, there's talent out there. And I hope that I have contributed somehow to that. So eventually, later on, I think one of the highlights is, being the senior intelligence officer of an infantry brigade in Iraq. That was the first female to do that. And I think it was a surprise to many people when I showed up as a senior intel officer and I set up the Joint Intelligence Center in Balad, Iraq, established it and ran it, and was successful in doing that, largely because of the team that I had and building team and taking all the things, the investments that senior military leaders had put into me prior to that. And I must say, all of them were male. These were the men who were willing to take a chance, to coach, teach, mentor when it wasn't done before, to have the kind of vision to see talent and raise them up and not be afraid to do that. And I think all of us could say that because we are in a male-dominated profession, and it really takes brave men to be to say, I think what's best for us is to have different perspectives. And I think that's what I brought to the table. So, also in this role, I'm the first female to fill this role as a mobilization assistant to Indo-PACOM, as well as having sat in as the chief of staff and deputy commander for the largest and oldest combatant command in the United States. So I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for those experiences in the past.
Thanks very much, General. Most appreciated. I think let's just continue with the same order that we just changed over to. So I think I'll go over to Commander Hay for our third question. Every country faces unique challenges when it comes to integrating women into their defense forces or militaries. And what are some of the unique challenges facing your organization, and what are some of the ways you have seen your organization make progress in this area? Commander, over to you.
Thank you, sir. I think I feel quite confident in saying that I'm very blessed because the Australian Defence Force is quite advanced, and the changes that I've seen over the past 28 years has been extraordinary. We continue to increase the numbers of women, and most importantly, we continue to increase the diversity of women throughout the ADF and throughout all our serving members. Numbers is always the challenge. We still have some legacy behaviour establishes that you will be an admiral by the age of 42, and that's the pathway that you'll get through. And when I think of myself, who is not 42, then when you start to curveballs into a linear career, such as children or requirements to support family, be they children or parents, then those pathways are not achievable. Certainly, though, our organisation is moving towards where we can start to execute a career at your pace, and I'm certainly testament to that. So that absences from the workplace due to your having children is not a demonstration of a lack of commitment to the service. We've also been quite a large country with a small population, and much like the US and India, we have a lot of location movements. I've had 15 houses in 28 years, and that doesn't include my 12 years at sea. And so some stability is also something that we've been able to improve upon, and we're trying and do more back-to-back postings in locations so that families can get more stability. And when you with that, it becomes more attractive to women who still want to be engaged with their family, not just their immediate family, but also those around them. We brought in provisions to be able to work remotely, alternate work locations, or even work away from your home family unit, but have continuous reunion opportunities throughout the year that's all supported by Defence. But one thing that I'd really like to share is an observation I've just made from my latest deployment with 1,500 of the finest Australians you could possibly meet. Gender blindness. This was the most extraordinary thing for me to see. The junior officers and the junior sailors did not care if you were male or female. They just wanted to know that you were doing your duty and executing it to your best. But you note that I say it's the junior officers and the junior sailors. There's still a little bit of legacy attitude at the top. And even most recently, I hear the rhetoric of we're trying to do the right things by her. Well, I would say rather than right things by her, the right thing by that sailor and by that officer, and stop and ask that individual, male or female, what is the right thing for them to continue to serve. Nobody puts on this uniform out of a whim. We've just heard from the previous three officers, we didn't do it because we thought we'd look in white or green as it may be, but we did it because we're committed to serving our nation and to serving the region. And together as a quad, we're committed to one another. So for the ADF, I think we are going to a true position of strength. I've been blessed to be part of it over the past 28 years, and I continue to look forward to how we take this into the future and being a part of that leadership role. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. Admiral Sarin?
Thank you, Admiral. My country's take on integrating women into defense forces and some of the unique challenges that are faced. We have had women in the armed forces as military nursing service since the 1927. In 1943, women medical officers were inducted. So as you can see, we have had women medical officers in the Indian Armed Forces from 1943. We've had a long legacy. Our careers have almost paralleled with our male counterparts. And like mentioned, gender blindness, that has been the order of the day as far as the medical services are concerned. But it took 5 decades, in 1992, when they inducted lady officers in restricted combat support arms. So that was a long time, and they started them in a short service commission in branches like education, judiciary, logistics, etc. The main drawback on the whole thing to recruitments to induct women as troops in India was the social, the social challenge and the hesitations, the remote locations, multicultural societies, which were hesitant to send out their girls to join the army. And of course, the deployment in hospital terrains and conditions in the absence of commensurate matching infrastructure. But to improve upon this, the government has taken it upon itself, to find a way out for increasing this input of women in the armed forces. So the increase in secondary education in India, the increasing social awareness through electronic and print media, social media, has propagated the armed forces as a recognized and respectable career for women. There have been various role models in society, like when the armed forces go into rapid action forces or the paramilitary forces go in, they look at them and they want it as a career, it's visible. The government of India has taken it forward by recruiting about 117 women right now at lower ranks in the military police, which is really historic for us. So we're going to have them in the ranks, women in the ranks, which is new for us. And the recent decision of the Supreme Court of India regarding the grant of permanent commission to these short service commission officers who were taken on earlier is viewed as landmark. It's a landmark step towards women empowerment. This corrective change towards gender equality is really the need of the hour. And the government is also taking up major infrastructure upgradations and progress in border areas to facilitate future deployments of women. There are major and rapid transformations at hand post the establishment of the DMA and the post of the CDS. So I can see that women are going to have an increased role in the armed forces. There's an infrastructure alteration in the ships. The older ships which had no logistic support for women are now being built to be able to suit so. We just now this year have posted women in combat on board ships as well as lady doctors on board ships. So that's a progression. We have female pilots, we have female fighter pilots in the Air Force. And both the Indian Navy has just commissioned its first batch of observers as well as Dornier pilots, and so is the Coast Guard, and so on and so forth. So I again feel the same. I would like to echo the same thing, that leadership, movement upstairs, looking at the other branches and diversity is the key to the future and the participation of women in the armed forces and in peacekeeping processes. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you, Admiral. I'll repeat the question again midway through, just again for all those following us. Every country faces unique challenges when it comes to integrating women into their defense forces or militaries. What are some of the unique challenges facing your organization, and what are some of the ways you have seen your organization make progress in this area? We're going to pass over to Captain Kawashima.
Okay, firstly, I'd like to mention about the situation about Japan. The security environment around Japan has becoming increasingly severe, and the mission and the operations of SDF are becoming diversified. On the other hand, decreasing birth rate and the aging population is serious issue in Japan. SDF is taking measures to recruiting and retention of women from the viewpoints of human resources, the requirements for abilities. In 2019, the Ministry of Defense announced an initiative for promoting women's empowerment and has working on improvement of the situation, such as abolishing the restrictions for women in the assignments, better work-life balance, and reforming maternity leaves, paternity leaves, taking measures for the prevention of sexual harassment. I think they have shown some results. The percentage of women in SDF was 7.4% last year, and it increased 0.5% compared to the previous year. The first female fighter pilot and the submariner were born in these 2 years. The percentage of men who take paternity leaves increased to about 80%. And personally, I believe that the most effective and helpful support for women is their female seniors who experienced and overcame lots of difficulties, like mentors. That's all.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you. And General, your thoughts on this question?
Thank you so much. I think, our distinguished panelists hit on a lot of great points. And I think, to be honest and open, is something telling of a free and open society. That we can talk about these issues openly is very encouraging. And, just as the Admiral Sarin had mentioned, World War II was pivotal in changing and mobilizing the world and the nation to show that really, this year is the 75th year of the end of World War II. And, we had that celebration or commemoration in September. And it's just a reminder that, the entire nation had to mobilize, and women held non-traditional jobs. We had the Women's Army Corps, the Women's Auxiliary Corps. We had the women service pilots who shuttled aircraft across the English Channel and around the country. And it really took the entire population, and it set the conditions that showed that women were an integral part of peace and security and could contribute, that they could rise to the occasion. And I think that was significant. And of course, everything went back to the way it was, and we had to realize change over time. Well, fortunately, because of those who came before us, we have today groundbreaking pioneers who've led the way in being some of our first fighter pilots in the 90s, to serve on submarines, to command ships, and to lead organizations at the highest levels never seen before. About 15 to 20%, depending on the service, are women, but around 10% serve at our top officer, general officer, flag officer, and senior enlisted ranks. For the first time ever, our Air Force has senior enlisted female command chief, master chief, and she's actually from Hawaii. But she leads all the enlisted corps in our Air Force, which is really awesome. 2008, General Dunwoody became our first female 4-star general to lead all Army logistics. 2014, Admiral Howard was our first naval female officer and 4-star. And General Lori Robinson in 2014 was our first 4-star female to command Pacific Air Forces, all Air Force in the Pacific here, and then to become Northcom, or Northern Command Commander, which really provides for the defense of the continental United States, which is really very significant. And then as a result of that, 2015, the Combat Exclusion Act was changed. That opened all jobs, as long as women could meet the standard, to women. And that meant, so now over 35 women have completed the Army Ranger School. And then we've had our first actually Special Forces female graduate. These changes over time are thankfully, again, those who broke the barriers prior to us. But we still have a long way to go. And I think some of those were brought up in terms of family. How do you balance family? How do you balance, old gender norms? But I think we're working our way there, and we are having this discussion and looking for ways that we can leverage the talent and skills that exist in the other 50% of the population. Thank you.
Thank you, General. We'll move now on to our final question for the panel, and I'll continue in the same order. This question is really quite simple, but it probably requires a lot of reflection. What is the one message or piece of advice you would like to share with young women considering joining your defense force or military? And we'll start again with Commander Hay.
Thank you, sir. I'll try not to soapbox too much on this one, but certainly my message would actually be to the men. And I would put to them, why would you prevent 50% of your available soldier, sailors and airmen from contributing to your military just because they're called Arti, Junko, Suzanne or Philippa? Women are intelligent, women are courageous, women are capable, and women can and should lead at all levels. For the current serving women, I would say if you're not reaching out to another woman, then you're forgoing on one of your core duties. And for the women who are wishing to serve, be strong, Be the best you can be, because we need you to be part of this organisation, because only through together, with our men and women serving, can we enrich our militaries. And my other hot tip would be to teach your men how to cook and iron so that they can be self-sufficient so you can deploy. That is all. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you. To the point. And next we'll go to Admiral Sarin.
Thank you, Admiral. My message to the young women considering joining the Defence Force or the military would be that strength and poise is not built in a gym. The armed forces trains its men and women to face a multitude of challenges by shaping many virtues. Like number one would be a positive attitude. Have courage, use adversity to your advantage. You must be confident. You have a drive, multitasking abilities. Again and again, we stress on leadership qualities. And like we said, as ladies, we have to be leaders to our juniors. Only then can we have people reaching higher ranks. Fitness, both mental as well as physical. Mental and physical resilience, adaptability, and team spirit. The most important would be team spirit and large and huge communication skills. And apart from comprehensive training and academic opportunities available, the armed forces is a fantastic profession, a lifetime experience. As an officer, a sailor, in the ranks, a manager of men, material. The postings allow you the experience of various exotic locations all over the world. There are opportunities to travel within and outside your country. Sports, adventure, physical activities are constantly encouraged. It's all about the team. Join the armed forces and serve your nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Captain Kawashima.
Okay, I was often asked what was the hardship because of being a woman in the MSCF. But to be honest, it was not a pain for me to challenge difficulties. And I could meet excellent classmates in MSCF. And there are a lot of opportunities, not only for men, but also women in military or SDF. So I'd like to send a short but my favorite words for young women considering joining Defense Force or military. Just challenge. Life is what you make it.
Thank you very much, Captain. And to you, General, the one message or piece of advice you'd like to share with young women considering joining your Defense Force or military. General.
Well, thank you. I think that we used to have this saying in the Army commercial, be all that you can be, and you really can. In a free and open society that promotes equality, justice, democracy, as all of our nations on this quad do, anything is possible because we can have free and open dialogue about the possibilities. We can try and attempt something without fear. And I think that is the beauty, that you can realize your passion, those of you who are out there, anyone. And I really appreciate all of your comments. And Commander Hay, when you said a message to the men out there is thank you to those mentors. And also there's a book called Athena Rising, Why Men Should Mentor Women, because they are in that position of power. But obviously we wouldn't all be here if it wasn't for that enlightened, free and open thinking that's based on values of that a stronger society happens when you're inclusive. And for those of you thinking about the military, pursue your passion. And your passion can be, all these things that you see on movies in Hollywood, Bollywood, thought, well, that's not for me because I'm not that gender. Anything's possible today. So it's very exciting. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, General, and really a hearty thanks to all of our panelists. Some tremendous wisdom that you've shared with us today. My thanks also to U.S. Indo-Pacific Command and those attending this webinar. In closing, just a few points. Today's webinar has been an opportunity to celebrate the anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, and review how its agenda has evolved through defense and security sector implementation. It's been an opportunity to underscore how our respective nations' shared values foster secure, resilient, and inclusive societies. It's also been an opportunity to emphasize how a free and open Indo-Pacific enables new opportunities for previously untapped resources, innovation, and leadership. And lastly, this has been an opportunity to highlight the commitment of Australia, India, Japan, and the United States to women, peace, and security in the Indo-Pacific. So thanks everyone for joining us today. You can also follow both Pacific Forum and US Indo-PACOM social media for future women, peace, and security events. After this, we'll share a closing slide with our Facebook and Twitter handles. This concludes our program, and again, thank you for attending.